Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining me today. So, a couple of days ago, a patron was asking me some questions about values, and specifically about how I organize values and how I keep track of them and control them throughout the process without them looking like they're overworked and still keeping kind of a subtle look to them. So I thought that was a good question, and that's going to be the thrust of what we talk about today. But I'm going to draw a portrait here in a moment, but first I wanted to give you this kind of an oversimplification of what I'm talking about. So am I on the viewfinder? Yeah, okay, I'm barely in there. So if we're going to think about a very, very simple value scale, and we're just going to divide it into four pieces: black, white, a dark halftone, and a light halftone. And so here at the beginning, let's just make it sort of a sphere here. The sphere is just sort of floating in space. And this is how I would start a portrait, right? If I just start with lines and filling in values with charcoal, I'm really drawing and I'm thinking of terms of just one value, or two if we count white. Just black and white is all I'm focusing on, the extremes here, the black and the white. But if I move this around now with my finger a little bit, what that does is it takes the black and the white, it takes those both away, and it brings everything towards the middle. So now everything is dark halftone and light halftone. So the concept here, the oversimplification, is that the halftones now have all been taken care of, and all we need to do at this point is come back in and reassert the darks. In this case, that would just be the core shadow, and put back in the lights, which is just going to be the highlight. And so that's what I mean by the oversimplification. When we talk about a portrait, it's not that simple. It's not a simple sphere. It's a much, much more complex shape. But that's kind of my thinking here. And I will, as I draw this, I'm going to point out what I mean a little more thoroughly. Okay, so here at the beginning, at the very, very beginning, I'm not really thinking about value much. I'm just trying to get a basic idea of where things are going to go, and just to start to get a real simple basic idea. Maybe I put in my thirds, 2, 3, eye line, but I don't really do a lot of measuring more than that. But I just want to kind of get a sense of things, start suggesting some values, suggesting the width of the whole head here, and just take some guesses, very loosely take some guesses. And I might start to indicate value. I picked this reference for this discussion because I thought it had a nice range of values. It's got a nice range of dark halftones and light halftones, for that matter. But like there, I'm just getting the faintest, barest indication of that cast shadow there, because it's just kind of a dominant form. But I don't want to get too hung up on things like that too early. But when there's a reference that has a very nice range of values, a very good story of values, I'll try and work a lot of that into my construction, just because it's very descriptive for this particular reference, and sometimes it might not always be the same thing, really. But we're just going to take a stab at our corners of the mouth, shadow under the lower lip. And I'm probably, ultimately, will just treat all of this shadow over here that I'm sort of drawing the outlines of. I'm just going to end up probably treating a lot of that as one thing. I will revisit that in a moment here. Look at the distance between the eyes. Just approximate that. We're kind of it's not really a three-quarter view, but it's not a straight on either. This distance, this shadow side is wider than this side, so I probably want to thin out this side because it feels too much like she's looking right at us. Or not looking at us, but facing right towards us. And then this side's a little bit wider. But all of this, I don't want to be too specific. I'm just blocking in simple forms. And then I'm going to, once I start throwing in some real value here, then we'll get a little bit more serious about the position of things. I'm just going to color a lot of this in here. And let's continue this edge of this shadow. And as if we were talking about in the beginning with that example of the sphere, right now I'm thinking in terms of just that one or two values, black and white. I'm not really dividing it up any more than that. At some point here, I will, and I'll start to add in maybe one more value before I brush it or run my finger through it or something to equalize it, to bring the values towards the center, so to speak. But I'm just kind of thinking in terms of like if you're familiar with the posterized term, if you've ever used Photoshop, or a threshold, that's kind of where I'm going with this. Just black or white. If it's 50%, 50% or more, it's black. All right, I've already got this nose misplaced here. And I'm not thinking about edges at all. A lot of these edges and all this noise in here, I'm not going to worry about that, because when I brush it or agitate it in some way, that's going to affect all those edges. So there's no point at all in thinking about edges. We're just trying to nudge things into position. Look, and I'm focusing a lot more here at the beginning. I'm thinking a lot about the whole shape of her head. And for me, a lot of these things are develop gradually. I will still be changing things all the way at the end of the drawing. That's just kind of how I roll, I guess. And part of that is just because I don't do a lot of measuring. So I use a method that sort of searches a little bit. That sort of is one of the reasons why I use charcoal, just because it's very editable. I'm just going to briefly give her some sort of a vignette here. And I want to think about how that shadow is going to... I got a little bit of a cast shadow there on her neck, underneath the chin, and it kind of comes up over the collar and back and back and back. And This is what I was saying earlier about treating all of this shadow just as one thing. And you can do that. I'm just going to use my finger here, and I'm just going to take out the noise of this either. But I'm also going to combine all of these that you might see as separate shadows. I'm going to combine all of those kind of into just one singular unit. And that kind of helps me to refocus and think about the whole head here rather than you can get really distracted dividing things up too early before you've got things where you want them. And like this nose is still not right. I'm just going to use my little brush here just to try and nudge some of this around until I'm a little bit happier with that. I think it's too high here. But it's easier for me to move things around like this if I've kept things very simple. It's not that big of a deal to just move the whole thing down if it's too high. But if I had gone in there and was penciling in a bunch of subtle value and things like that, the decision to move it becomes a harder one because you've put more work into it. And as it develops, of course, I want to get more and more specific and more informative. I'm showing more and more information, but I kind of like to sneak up on that because I've had hundreds of drawings that I've started developing too early, and I didn't have things quite in the right place, and I always sort of kick myself because you end up redoing the same things over and over, and that's not fun. But that's just one of the reasons I like charcoal, because you can kind of just draw and enjoy yourself and not worry too much about it. Okay, so another thing I'm going to do here at the beginning is now I'm starting to think in terms of more values, not just black and white. But I don't really want to think much beyond that simple scale that I was showing at the beginning with just black, white, and a couple of midtones. And I'm calling all of anything that's not black or white halftone. And some people have a different meaning for the word halftone, but I'm just, for the purposes of our discussion here, I'm just talking about anything that isn't black or white. Dark halftones and light halftones. But I want to get these light halftones in, and those are important to have in there. And you can have too much of them, I suppose, but I usually worry about not having enough more than I worry about them being too dark, because that's the only thing that's going to make your highlights have any punch to them, is if those halftones have some nice value in there. And as you brush it around and move material around on the page, that value kind of has a tendency to develop, which is a good thing. I mean, you don't want it to compete with the shadows, of course. You've got to control those values, but the concept, basically, like I was talking about in the beginning, is that, okay, now my values or my halftones are taken care of, and what I want to do now is go back in and just reassert the darks and pop back in the highlights. In practice, it's never that simple. Sometimes I will brush through things more than once. If I'm having issues, sometimes I will selectively just brush an eye socket or something if I've got it in the wrong place. And that's the way that I work. There's always some repairing to do, or something that you got wrong. Again, because I don't do a lot of measuring, there are going to be things that are just not quite right. And if you approach that in a way that you're anticipating that, you can make that work for you. I just kind of like this way of sketching really loosely and being relaxed with it, and that application, I think, comes through in the end result. Okay, so just starting to develop these values now, and I'm trying to focus anyway on the darkest darks, really, more than anything. And that's sort of the general plan here, is to work those dark darks. But I'm taking guesses, but I'm taking better guesses now because I've got a lot more of the form in there. But it's here in a moment. I'm going to just tighten up a few of these edges, and then I'm going to get up and take a little break and have a look at it, and just to assess where I'm at, I guess. Let me get a little bit more just so I have something more to look at. And again, even the side of the mouth here, I'm probably not going to have any detail over there at all. I'm just going to try and there's a little bit of a core shadow I might try and develop through there. And then just let all of these details be, like these details I'm putting in, even the corner of the mouth there, I might just get rid of that. It's kind of interesting. We have a sharp cast shadow here from the lower lip. And then you have this softness of this form shadow coming up on the chin. A little bit of dark there to kind of push that back under the chin there. And again, as I come around here, I might not have any of this. Even this jawline I might get rid of completely. Ears up here. But going back to talking about values, it's the character of these edges tell you a lot about. A lot of people think about values it's just areas where there's a lot of material or not. But if you think about what they're telling you, it really helps you to do your job, because for instance, this transition here on the forehead is very, very gradual, because it's a very round form. It's a very big round form. Here, same on the cheek here. It's very gradual here. And you compare that with the sharpness of this cast shadow here from the nose, how sharp this is and how gradual this is. But that's all giving you information. Even this here, that's telling you that this lip is sticking out there, but then you've got this soft form shadow coming up out of there. As we get down here, I'm always tempted to put details into things down here, but if it's just a quick sketch, I don't want to drag the eye down here, really. So I usually keep things like this simple. If I were doing a figure or a half figure, that might be a nice place to put in some details. And let's look at the ear here. Really not seeing a lot of it. Just a suggestion. Hair is very dark black. I was looking at this. I'm interested to hear what your opinion is on this. I was looking at this reference, and I'm not sure that it isn't AI generated. It's really, if it is AI, it's a pretty good one. I can usually spot those things, but there's just something about this image. It's a little too perfect or something. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what your opinion is. It's just an image that I found on Pinterest, but I don't like using AI stuff. Just the whole concept of it sort of is off-putting, but it's, yeah, I got fooled on this one if it is. Usually if you follow like single strands of hair or something like that, you can kind of on an AI image, sometimes it wants to simplify things. I don't know. I'm getting off on a tangent there, but yeah, this one fooled me if it is, and I don't know that it is. It might just be a really nice photo. I'm trying to put this value in sort of directionally, sort of vertically, because that's kind of how her hair is going. Not down here, but up here. And I will think about that at this stage too, where I didn't at the beginning. At the beginning, I was saying I'm not worried about edges or anything like that. Now I'm thinking about edges. And here's one of those areas where I'm going to divide up this shadow side into a little bit of, I'm going to just differentiate the hair coming down here, and that's it. I'm going to keep this one really simple. I kind of like how understated it is, actually. I just want this hairline to be not completely stiff. It sort of ends up looking like she's got a helmet on or something. I'm just going to take my brush and just let this get soft there. She's got kind of a, it's cut off. Whenever I give you guys a reference or show you a reference, I never crop things like this off. If something like this, and this is not a bad example of that really, but if you ever have a reference of mine that crops off the top of the head or something like that, I'm actually cropping it off now in the viewfinder, I just noticed. But yeah, that's just how I got it. I don't really like using those just because it kind of affects your perception of it. But, beggars can't be choosers. Okay, I don't want any more detail than that up there. And so let's get our, actually, I'm going to take a break right now and go get a cup of coffee, and then I'm going to stand back and take a look at this and see where I'm at. Okay, so I stood up and I had a look at it, and there are some things that I wanted to address. I've got this eye's a little low. This eye line's kind of going down that way, and I want to try and raise this up just a bit. Pretty much just nudging the whole thing up. That's one of the beauties of simplifying and working in a simple way. I was kind of talking about this earlier. Is that you can kind of move things around like that, just to get the position right. And if you want to develop it further, you can of course you can do that as much as you like, but it's being able to move things around in a real efficient, simple way can really help. And it makes you less reluctant to deal with it, to change it. Like I was kind of referring to that a little bit earlier too, where you start putting a lot of effort into something and getting something what you deem to be just right becomes a little bit more of a, you have to convince yourself a little bit more that it's worth nudging over an eighth of an inch or something. This is one of those too where the irises, it's more like you just want to hint at them. We want them to be kind of vague in there. Sometimes I will just hit the bottom of them like that. Let that sit, see if I like it, if I like that. I think the nose and the mouth are a little bit, could stand to come over this way a little bit. I don't know how much I want to wrestle with that at this point. I probably should have stood up a little earlier and assessed. It's not terribly bad. It's for a sketch. Keep it loose. Just remember, every time you use that brush, and this is kind of goes back to that first little illustration we were doing at the beginning, whenever you use the brush or your finger or anything like that to move this stuff around, just touch it really with this soft charcoal. It's going to lighten it, which may be what you want, and it is what you want if we're talking about the basic concept like we were trying to illustrate at the beginning. But it's important to remember that every time you do that, you're lightening things, so you need to always come back and reassert. It's like whenever you use that brush, what I'm really doing is creating halftone. But that just means that I'm also getting rid of details and darks and things like that. And I'm going to further simplify some of this stuff over here, even this. Just let go of some of that. Trying to find a core shadow there. I'm inventing this a little bit. I don't want to go too far with it. Just suggesting. Some of these outlines I might not need. I still have not gotten this. I'm gonna get the kneaded eraser involved at this point because one, it will give me another level of value. First time really that I'm indicating the lightest lights, and I'm noticing right now is what I was talking about earlier about not having enough value up here. So I'm going to put in a little bit more. Oops. I'm just going to move that around with my finger a little bit. And the only reason I do that is because I want that highlight to have a little bit of punch to it. It is fairly light over here, so I don't want to go too far with it though. This highlight tells you a lot about topography, and gives you those high points. Let's see, there's some light coming straight down through there. And it defines that, helps define that side plane. Sometimes in critiques, one of the things I notice people do a lot, and I will usually mention it, is drawing in the side plane of the nose. I'll show you what I mean here in a moment. Okay, so what I mean is that people will draw in this side plane of the nose, even on the light side, and sometimes you can describe that just with your highlights or with your lights going in. Maybe you've got some more than one halftone value there, but you can you can describe these planes. Here's another one that I'm going to put in right now. I'm going to put this highlight into this muzzle part of the nose, and that's going to help to define that nasolabial fold. Like right now, I don't have any really, and there's a little bit of value there, but I'm not really drawing in that nasolabial fold, even though you can see it fairly clearly. But if I do this, and I let that get fairly sharp there, it might need a little bit more value, but I think you see what I'm saying. Sometimes you don't need to draw that in. Sometimes that's enough. That's a fairly subtle fold right there. She's smiling, so I'm going to put a little bit more value in here where the cheeks kind of bunch up there when you smile. And that's going to pronounce the nasolabial fold a little bit. So I'm going to add a little bit of value in there. But for the most part, that highlight does most of the work there. Leave that subtle. Let's work out this nostril a little bit. Here's another example of that, this nostril here on the side. What do I want to do with that now? I need this, that highlight to come off a little sooner. That's a little bit better. Try and get a little bit of light out of here. I'm going to not use my eraser for that, just to give this not quite as bright as it is the sharper highlights. A few little spots here in the tear duct and the kind of that area around the eye often picks up a few little highlights in there. Smaller details now, just about finished, really. I don't quite have this. I want to move this central, the philtrum of the mouth there. Just nudge that over a little bit. And if I'm not worrying too much about likeness for this, but it's if I were, this is kind of the stage right here where I would stay a lot longer, and I would push and pull and think about these, stand back and look at it several times, and just gently push and pull things into position and get things a little closer to this actual person, and pay attention to corner of the mouth and the glabella and things like that to really sort of dial it in. And let's get, I want to get a little bit of value on her lower lip, and then pop one little highlight in there, and then we're going to leave the ears just exactly like they are. I like that very rough, suggested look. Just add a couple of little points of interest to her hair. Just so it's not quite so flat. little detail-y things now. That this is where you think about whether you're overworking things or not. I'm going to try and get just the slightest little indication of a lid line. Sometimes I'll switch to my charcoal pencil here just to kind of drag over some of these edges, just if I want, making very, very small adjustments now. Little bit of, sometimes I'll look at an area like this brow line. It just seems a little flat, and there's often a nice little dark spot right as the eyebrow comes over the brow line, just to make it a little less flat. A little bit noisy. All right, I think that's where I'm going to leave this one, guys. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to ask. And I hope I answered the original question a little bit more adequately. If you do have any questions, please just leave them down below, and I would be more than happy to address them. And I will see you guys on the next one. Take care, everyone.